Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I am your host Kitanjali. So this is a part 3. In my previous video I have already given the basic structure of cell. So this is a basic structure of cells and these are the cell organelles. So before discussing these organelles one by one, there are few topics left which we will be discussing today or now. So let's discuss them first and then we will get into these organelles one by one. So the topic is types of cell on the basis of cellular structure. So on the basis of cellular structure, the cell is divided into two types, that is prokaryotic cell and other one is eukaryotic cell. Now what is prokaryotic cell? Prokaryotic cell means a primitive cell or a less developed cell, while the eukaryotic cell means a well developed cell. So this is the basic difference between both the cell. This is the less developed cell and this is the more developed cell. Now the second point is prokaryotic cell do not contain membrane bound organelles such as nucleus, mitochondria, etc. So this is the type of cell which do not have a membrane bound organelles such as nucleus or mitochondria, while eukaryotic cell contains membrane bound organelles such as nucleus, mitochondria. So now the question arises, what is membrane bound organelles? So consider this part as an organelle which is surrounded by a cover which is known as membrane. So the organelle which is surrounded by or covered by a membrane is known as membrane bound organelle. So nucleus and mitochondria are such organelles which contains membrane. So they are known as membrane bound organelle. So prokaryotic cell do not have membrane bound organelles while the eukaryotic cell contains membrane bound organelles. Now comes example. So the example of some organisms which contain prokaryotic cells are bacteria, blue-green algae, mycoplasma, etc. So these contains a less developed cell, while the example of eukaryotic cell are protists, plants, animals, fungi, etc. So they contain a well-developed cell, that's why they have eukaryotic cell. Topic is important cell organelles. So let's first start with the plasma membrane or cell membrane. So now what is the definition of plasma membrane? And the definition is the outermost covering of the cell that separates the cell from its external environment is known as cell membrane. Before further discussion, I would like to tell you guys that plasma membrane is the outermost covering of animal cell, not plant cell, because plant cell has the outermost layer of cell wall. So plasma membrane is the second-most outer layer of plant cell. Let's understand this plasma membrane with the help of this diagram. So this is a plasma membrane. So as the definition says that it is the outermost layer which separates cell from the external environment. So it acts as a bridge. It acts as a bridge which separates cell from its external environment. Now comes the structure and composition. So let's first discuss composition. What is the composition of plasma membrane? Plasma membrane is composed or is made up of two-layered lipid and protein. So lipid and protein constitute cell membrane. Now let's see the structure. This is the basic structure of plasma membrane. According to the composition, there are two layers of lipid. This is the two layer of the lipids in which protein is sandwiched. or we can say that these proteins are present in between the two layers of lipid. These two layers are lipid, and these are the proteins. So it is the basic structure of cell membrane or a detailed structure of a cell membrane. Now, what are the functions of cell membrane? So the first one is it allows or permits the entry and exit of some materials in and out of the cell, therefore known as selectively permeable membrane. As I have earlier told that plasma membrane is a bridge between the external environment and the cell. Or we can say that if there is some waste material present inside the cell, so cell membrane makes sure that these waste material get out of the cell. So it selectively selects some material which goes in and out of the cell. That's why it is known as selectively permeable membrane, or we can say that semi-permeable membrane. Now the second point, by the process of osmosis and diffusion, plasma membrane allows the entry and exit of the materials. What does this line means? This line means that the entry and the exit of the material inside and outside the cell is regulated by the process which is known as osmosis or diffusion. So let me give you some basic view on osmosis and diffusion. Diffusion is for gaseous particle and osmosis is for liquid particles. Okay, we will further discuss this osmosis and diffusion in detail. Now the last function is it is the outermost covering of animal cell and it helps to protect cell. So the main function of the plasma membrane is to protect cell. We know that with the help of plasma membrane, the materials moves inside and outside the cell. Now the question arises that how does the movement of substance takes place into the cell and how does substance move out of the cell? So the answer is with the process or with the help of diffusion and the osmosis, the materials goes out and inside of the cell. We will study in detail about diffusion and osmosis. So, what is diffusion? And the answer is the spontaneous movement of substance from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration is known as diffusion. Or diffusion allows the movement of gaseous material inside or outside the cell through the plasma membrane. So diffusion is the process in which the gaseous material moves from a region of a high concentration to a region of a low concentration. Let's understand this diffusion with the help of some examples. Let's take an example of respiration. So, what is respiration? Respiration is the process in which intake of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide takes place. We all know that this is the basic information about respiration. So, consider this circle as a cell which is surrounded by its environment. So, this is the environment. As we know that in our environment there is a huge amount of oxygen present, and also our cell is deficient in oxygen. So what happens, the higher concentration of oxygen present in an environment moves towards the cell which has the less concentration of oxygen. So this is what diffusion is. This was the example of intake of oxygen. Now let's take a second example to understand diffusion. In respiration process, we have talked about the intake of oxygen earlier. Now we are talking about the removal of carbon dioxide. We all know that we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. So this is an example of the removal of carbon dioxide. So in this what happens, our cell has a lot of carbon dioxide in it, but our environment has a less concentration of carbon dioxide. So what happens with the help of diffusion process, these carbon dioxide which is present inside the cell in the higher concentration moves towards the environment which has the low concentration of carbon dioxide. So in this also, the movement of carbon dioxide from a higher concentration to lower concentration takes place. So this is the second example of diffusion. Now let's talk about osmosis. Please remember this, that diffusion is the movement of gaseous particle and osmosis is the movement of liquid particle. So don't get confused between this different process. Okay. Now what is osmosis? So the movement of water from a region of higher concentration of water through semi-permeable membrane to a region of low concentration of water is known as osmosis. So the osmosis is nothing but the movement of water from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration with the help of semi-permeable membrane, which is known as cell membrane, is known as osmosis. Let's understand osmosis with the help of this example. So consider this as a beaker in which kishmish is soaked in. So this is a kishmish and this is a beaker which is full of water. So what happens after few hours or after 24 hours, due to osmosis, kishmish swells and get bigger in sizes. So according to osmosis, there is the movement of water from a region of a higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. So exactly in this example, what happens? In beaker, there is a humongous amount of water or a large amount of water which goes inside kishmish, because kishmish has lower concentration of water. So what happens? These water gets into kishmish and it swells up and becomes bigger in size. So this is what osmosis is.